Last year, I bought this 2001: A Space Odyssey ripoff because I have never owned a video game console at launch, and I wanted to celebrate my first year with a steady job out of college. And I really do enjoy my Xbox Series X for the most part. Load times are really fast, and games run fairly well without crashes. Unfortunately, there aren't many new video games to play that I care about or that haven't been delayed. But there are some cool older ones. And one of my goals for this year was to finish more games without wasting too much time trying to 100% larger games for meaningless percentage bars and gamer points. So far, I've been fairly successful at playing a wider variety of games and actually finishing each without getting sidetracked by difficult achievements or trophies. It has been a lot of fun. And this strategy has led me to try games that are in genres I usually try to avoid, made by game development studios and publishers whose work I've never tried. Enter NieR Automata, the 2017 critical darling that is a sequel to an obscure 2010 PS3 and Xbox 360 game, which is itself a spin-off of a trilogy of games about dragons? Oh yeah, and it's made by the funny skeleton head man that you may or may not have seen at an E3 press conference. This game practically screams, try new things. It's a weird entry into a weird franchise written by a weirdly wholesome skeleton featuring gothic android fashion models, fighting cute robots, and starring 2B, a character you've probably heard of if you've been on the internet at all in the last 4 years, for reasons we're not going to get into. While this might not be the video game you show your parents, it should be the game you show your friends who love video games. Or more specifically, friends who love the medium of video games, and how video games are uniquely positioned to enhance artistic expression through interaction. Basically, your video game snob who writes and watches essays about video games on YouTube. So, what is NieR Automata about? Well, it's complicated. But the basic premise is androids built by humans are fighting machines built by aliens for control over the Earth, in a post-apocalyptic setting where buildings are all busted up, but the local moose population is thriving. Confused? Well, I promise it's more straightforward than it sounds. At least until it isn't. I really don't want to spoil much, but please trust me when I say that I think this game's narrative is all around fantastic. NieR Automata nails one aspect of video game stories that I love: immersive storytelling supported through gameplay. The game twists common video game mechanics, like its heads-up display and camera, to pull off amazing narrative moments. Even its loading screens play with your expectations. And it gets weird and artsy, and it pulls crazy stunts, like rolling the opening credits for the game 30 or 40 hours into the experience. But Automata's brilliance doesn't come in one or two gimmicks. Each of the changes in the gameplay I'm describing or alluding to really affected how I experienced a scene, thought about a character, or better understood the game's setting.
Souls in heaven, huh? Do either of those things exist?
They'll find out in the end. And so will we.
Okay, that's grim.
A movie, or even a traditional video game cutscene, really can't pull these same tricks. This is a practice that's hard to put into words, and I'm not sure if a single term describes this positive relationship between gaming and narrative, but you sort of just know it when you play it. It's a horror game made scarier by a lack of weapons, or a role-playing game made more immersive by providing choices and consequences. NieR Automata is uncharted territory for me, not just narratively, but also because of its genre. The game is classified as an action RPG, but that's kind of a broad category, and it takes heavy influence from the character action game genre. A style of video game with such a high ceiling of complexity, I consider these kinds of titles to be almost as intimidating to get into as fighting games. NieR Automata was developed by Platinum Games, a studio known for this type of gameplay that you are seeing now. The game was produced in collaboration with Square Enix and aforementioned skeleton man-child genius Yoko Taro. even for Platinum, this game plays strangely. Most of the combat in the game centers around fighting machine enemies using stylized floating anime swords, but the player is also provided an additional attack in the form of a machine gun support unit that can and should be fired by the player often and accurately. Doing both at the same time can be difficult to wrap your head around, but it's often worth it. This gameplay can sometimes be almost like a bullet hell game, as enemies and bosses hurl thousands of projectiles at 2B and her android partner 9S. And sometimes, because this cheeky guy's a crazy person, the game actually does transform genres entirely, occasionally becoming a ship piloting, top-down, twin-stick shooter just to keep you on your toes. Just like with genres, the game also switches camera angles a lot, which changes how the player approaches and completes fights. I've rarely seen other games do this shift in camera outside of cutscenes, and personally, I loved the choice because it made the game feel more cinematic without taking the player out of the action by placing them into a cutscene or a boring QuickTime event. Overall, I had a really good time learning to play 2B. She gets a lot of new and interesting skills throughout the course of the game that keep the combat feeling fresh even when you are fighting the same dozen machine types for most of the game outside of bosses and boss battles. I by no means mastered these systems, but I did have a lot of fun improving incrementally with each encounter. Unfortunately, NieR Automata changes its gameplay at a certain point in the narrative in a way I do not like, even as the game's story ramps up in super interesting ways. This isn't in any way a deal breaker, but it is an interesting aspect of the game I want to discuss. To explain further, I'm going to have to somewhat spoil the first ending to the game, which, confusingly, is only a small portion of NieR Automata's overall narrative. Spoilers for Ending A, Flowers for Machines, ahead. NieR Automata plays with perspective in more ways than just camera angles and flight sequences. After the player beats the game for the first time as 2B, they are given the option to load their finished save file. Doing so loads the player into an alternate version of the game they've just played, from the perspective of 2B's partner, 9S.
Better make sure he's actually dead next time. That was dangerous, man.
This starts a whole new playthrough of the story up until the first ending, but now you're playing as Captain Boyshorts instead of Lieutenant Upskirt. 9S is a very interesting character in Automata's cast, with his own perspective on the android machine war that is both different from 2B and also different from how the player may perceive him while playing as 2B in their first playthrough. Taking control of 9S is more than just a model change. As 9S, you experience certain parts of the story that 2B does not. There are times when the two androids are separated, or working towards the same goal under different circumstances. Also, 9S communicates with a different android ally operator than 2B, and she's just the best.
9S,
What is it?
make sure to do whatever is necessary to avoid combat.
And how will I provide support to the squad if I don't fight?
Scanner units such as yourself are not designed for battle.
Aw, are you worried about me?
No, I'm merely pointing out that you would be a liability on the battlefield.
Wow, that's harsh.
When it's all said and done, you probably share around 60 to 70% of the same missions between playthroughs. All of this content is required to be replayed to get the different parts of 9S's story and to go beyond the first two playthroughs into what is actually still another whole section of the game, encompassing endings C, D, and E. I'm conflicted by this choice by the development team. I do think 9S's perspective on what's happening in the game is really important, but it's also a big commitment to play through 70% of the same game twice, especially when there's so much else out there to play. Something that was just as true in 2017 when Automata came out. People who stopped after ending A, like my friend Kyle. Yeah, his name is really Kyle. Kyle didn't really experience all of the game has to offer because he wasn't willing to try and speedrun an interesting but repetitive second playthrough to get to the good stuff. And this video is basically a call-out post directed at him. The second playthrough feels a bit like having to eat all your vegetables before you can chow down on some in-game content dessert. Apparently this problem is worse in the previous NieR title that was just remastered. I haven't played it, but I still don't love how it works in Automata. One of the ways that Platinum attempts to make the second playthrough worth it is by changing how combat works between playing as 2B and playing as NieS. Unlike 2B, who can switch between two weapons while fighting and perform light and heavy attacks against enemies, NieS can only carry one weapon at a time and is mostly limited to light attacks. This is because, in the world of NieR Automata, NieS is a scanner-type android designed for tasks like research and reconnaissance, not combat. That distinction will carry over into the gameplay. Why is this gameplay change important? Well, say you equip NieS with a hard-hitting but slower heavy weapon. That weapon becomes the only melee attack NieS can use, even though it's slow and hard to fight with in a lot of situations. Now, imagine this scenario in reverse. With a lighter weapon, NieS can attack enemies more rapidly, but only with weak attacks. 2B, an android designed for combat in the world of Automata, has much more freedom in this regard. By allowing the player to equip 2B with two weapons at the same time, a lot of different combat possibilities open up. One of the simplest is to equip 2B with a fast, light weapon as her regular attack, and a slower, more powerful weapon to use as an effective, heavy finisher at the end of an attack combo. You might be asking what NieS can do that 2B cannot to make up for his shortcomings.
Aw, are you worried about me?
Does the heavy attack button just not do anything when you're playing as NieS? Not exactly. NieS has the ability to hack almost any enemy in the game after a short charge up. Doing so initiates a quick, top-down, twin-stick minigame that will damage the enemy being hacked if the player succeeds in the sequence before running out of the set time limit. The damage payoffs for hacking are also very high, meaning that almost every encounter can be trivialized simply by completing the hacking minigame instead of engaging with the enemy in robot dances of death. This gameplay shift is really neat narratively, but I would be lying if I said it doesn't get old the more and more you do it. There simply aren't enough hacking stages for regular enemies, and the bigger payoffs in the hacking minigame don't come until very far down the line. I'm fine with NieS being conventionally weaker than 2B, but I still wish he could perform regular melee combos. A better solution might have been to replace NieS's pod specials with unique hacking attacks, but I'm not sure if that would have worked either. Overall, how NieS plays and how much I had to play him didn't drag down my experience with NieR Automata much. I feel a little too strongly about this issue to call it a minor gripe, but not liking one aspect of Automata, or any game for that matter, does not mean I can't absolutely adore the sum of its parts. If you haven't yet played this game, please do not let anything I've said today sway you from giving it a try. If you've stuck around until the end of this video, thank you. I've been blown away in the last few months at the reception this channel has gotten, and I can't wait to keep making more videos. Hopefully at a quicker pace. If you have any suggestions for topics you would like me to cover, either about games or anime and manga, please let me know. Also, I have a Twitter. It's not very active yet, but I hope to start using it a bit more now that the channel is starting to grow. Thank you again for watching.